Welcome to our video on famous American criminals who were executed. Throughout history, the United States has seen its fair share of notorious criminals who have committed heinous crimes and subsequently been put to death. In this video, we will take a look at some of the most infamous criminals in American history who were ultimately executed for their crimes. Number 1. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is one of the most well-known serial killers in American history. He was convicted of murdering at least 30 young women and girls in the 1970s. Bundy was known for his charm and good looks, which he used to lure his victims. He was sentenced to death in 1979 and was executed in 1989 by electric chair. Number 2. Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh was a domestic terrorist who was convicted of the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. The bombing killed 168 people, including 19 children, and injured over 600 others. McVeigh was a former soldier who was motivated by a hatred of the government. He was sentenced to death and was executed in 2001. Number 3. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, was a serial killer and rapist who murdered at least 33 young men and boys in the 1970s. Gacy was known for dressing up as a clown for children's parties and using that as a way to lure his victims. He was sentenced to death in 1980 and was executed in 1994. Number 4. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos was a serial killer who murdered at least 7 men in Florida in the early 1990s. Wuornos claimed that she killed her victims in self-defense, but her story was not believed by the court. She was sentenced to death and was executed in 2002. Number 5. Charles Starkweather. Charles Starkweather was a teenage killer who murdered 11 people in Nebraska and Wyoming in 1958. Starkweather's killing spree began as a crime of passion when he murdered his girlfriend's family after they forbid her to see him. He was sentenced to death and was executed in 1959. Number 6. Gary Gilmore. Gary Gilmore was a convicted murderer who was sentenced to death in 1977 for the murder of 2 men in Utah. He famously fought for his own execution and became the first person to be executed in the United States after the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976. He was executed by firing squad in 1977. Number 7. Leon Solgos. Leon Solgos was an American anarchist who assassinated President William McKinley in 1901. Solgos shot McKinley twice while he was greeting visitors at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. He was arrested and tried, and was sentenced to death by electrocution. He was executed on October 29, 1901. Number 8. Richard Speck. Richard Speck was a convicted murderer who broke into a dormitory for student nurses in 1966, killing 8 of them. He was arrested the next day and was sentenced to death in 1967. However, his sentence was later commuted to life in prison, and he died in prison in 1991. Number 9. Juan Corona. Juan Corona was a convicted serial killer who was found guilty of murdering 25 migrant farm workers in 1971 and 1972 in California. He was sentenced to 25 consecutive life sentences and died in prison in 2019. Thank you for watching our video on famous American criminals who were executed. We hope you found it informative and insightful. These criminals were some of the most notorious in American history and were held accountable for their heinous crimes through execution. Their actions caused immense pain and suffering for the victims and their families, and justice was served. It's important to remember that these acts were committed by individuals and do not reflect on the society as a whole. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more informative and interesting content. And as always, stay safe and take care. Thank you for watching.